sikhule broke ngifuna imali esongo amengena dog sizophanda kuzingosa got $1 billion tree yeah I need $1 billion tea yeah
Welcome to Frank Bro Talk. We are back with Chwayita. She's back with us. Today we're going to be talking about an important topic as well, which is a liquor license. For us who live in the township, this is something that is important for establishment that deal with liquor to have. Whether they have it or not is another thing. We're here to lay down the law and for us to understand, firstly, why would people get liquor licenses? What are the liquor licenses for and how does it protect us as the community? And secondly, the role of us as a community in the whole thing. But here to explain that to us is Chwayita. Welcome back, Chwayita. How did you like the last show, by the way?
It was good. It was good. I think the topic was interesting, and I think there's still a lot to unpack in relation to that because we only spoke about a few things, but we didn't actually get into talking about
deep.
Consent in a positive way rather than in the negative way of hearing, because that was mainly what we were talking about. We were just talking about hearing, but we weren't talking about consent in a positive way, which it can be something. The whole topic of sex and consent can be positive and not just talking about rape and statutory rape.
Okay. So we should actually.
We should.
Okay, cool. We'll do one for each of the three that we talked about. Is that going to be fine?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. For those that this is their first episode, welcome. Where have you been? To find out more of what we just spoke about now, or reflected on, rather, go to the very first episode. It's down below. And yes, please do not forget to subscribe. Are you subscribed to the channel, by the way? I said, so, like her, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment, please. It's not just Akile and Ayaka that are going to be on the comments. I got a comment about that comment, by the way. So yeah. Okay. We promised the viewers will do something about that and just do another episode. What I also wanted to ask is, or rather let people know, is that you have your own law firm.
Yep. Well, I'm a practicing attorney and I have a firm, and it's called Mathiso Attorneys, and you said you will provide the details of the
down below. They're going to be the
how
details.
to get hold of me and the firm, but obviously it's just Google Mathiso Attorneys, you will get all of my information.
Do you guys have a website?
Yeah, we do. We have a website, and we have like a functional Facebook page, but that's literally it.
Oh, okay. We want to get a website, and it's been a struggle to get that, but that's a topic on its own, and we'll get to it. But yeah, down below, that's where you're going to get all the details of a law firm and how to get in contact with them. Okay, now liquor license. What is that?
Okay, so a liquor license is a license that you get in order to operate a business that trades in alcohol, basically liquor. And you can get this license as a person or a entity that does trading, that sells alcohol. So basically that's it's a license to sell alcohol.
And what are the categories, or what does one need in order to obtain it?
There are different categories. So as you know, should know that there are many different types of establishments that sell alcohol.
Sure.
So there are restaurants that sell alcohol, there are bars, and there are shebeens, there are people who sell alcohol on an ad hoc basis. So it depends on what kind of license you're looking for. So a restaurant sells food and alcohol.
Okay.
A place that sells alcohol inside is where you can consume the alcohol, where you can drink the alcohol at the establishment is called an on-consumption.
Oh, okay.
Like a person for a business will get an on-consumption license. So that business sells alcohol and the customers will drink inside of that business. And then you have an off-consumption license, and that is for when you're selling liquor to the public, but they don't consume it within your premises.
Okay.
So that is, what do you call those things? Bottle stores and
distributors,
those kinds of shops.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I was about to say the ones that are common within the township are the taverns, the shebeens, but now we've got restaurants as well.
Yeah, we do. We have restaurants. It's not really the ones that are common. It's just the types of places that a person would frequent. For people who like to drink at home, for them, what they look at is an establishment where you can just purchase and go.
Bottle stop.
So there are many of those
Yes.
as well. And then there is places of entertainment where you either buy or bring the alcohol and then consume it at that place, or and then restaurants, of course, where there's food and alcohol.
And what are the requirements? Let's leave the distribution of the liquor store for a while. Yeah, the offsite. Let's park that one. So what would a restaurant, because we have a couple of restaurants now within Ekhayelitsha, and then we talk about also the in consumptions, which is the shopping or your Grover places, if I can call them that. So what are the requirements for them?
The requirements are more or less the same. The only difference with the shebeen is that it has a category on its own. It's more of a South African thing. It's more of a South African context type of category where they recognize that there are shebeens where people sell alcohol at a place that is not a restaurant or a Grover place, basically. So it's more accommodating for the informal market, not really informal market because it's formalized, but it caters for the township setting because back in the day the requirements were a bit stringent, and people were not allowed to consume or sell alcohol. Well, black people in particular were not allowed to consume and sell alcohol, so they made their own makeshift ways, and that category of licensing grew from that.
We come far. We were not even allowed to drink it. But anyway.
No.
We come far.
Yeah. So there are many facets to the story, but and so people had their own informal way of trading in alcohol, and shebeens grew from that, and then government then sought to regulate how that works from informality to some kind of formality, and I forget the question. Until it is now, but the history of it all.
Now what requirements are should use?
Okay, so the formal requirements is that the place it should be there should be a structure, and then it mustn't be too close to a school. It mustn't be too close to another establishment that is similar to it. It mustn't be close to a church. That's pretty much the requirement. So it must be 500 meters away from a school, a church, and another establishment that is similar to it.
Main road, we have two. Actually, we have three in the main road. There's Rand's, there's the Milk, and there's Keith's place. and they all three have liquor licenses.
Yeah.
One
And
is
in different kinds of establishments, by the way.
yes, one is a shipping.
Yeah.
I can say, Prakith is gonna kill me for this. But it's more of a tavern.
Yeah.
And then the milk is
Is
a
a
restaurant.
restaurant.
And then
The other one
Rents
is Groove.
is a grove.
Place.
And then there's a church
And
behind
then
them.
there's a church behind.
There's actually 1, 2, and 3 churches.
Yeah.
How does
In
that work?
close. So what you do is in your application you disclose how far you are away from the churches and schools and whatnot, and then the board that regulates the licensing makes a decision as to whether or not they allow the license to be issued irrespective of that. So you have to put in certain safeguards, you have to put in additional security and all of those things. They will say, okay, they will review your application and say, okay, because you are so close from the school, you need to do A, B, and C if you want us to grant this license. And even in that case, then you would have to comply with whatever the requirements are.
So I think time will then be a factor, because I'm assuming now, if the church is having a service from 9 until 3, that such establishment cannot
operate
within those times. So that we, okay, it makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes sense. So what if the churches around them are against the establishment being granted the license?
Okay, so when you're applying for a new license in particular, all of the things that you need to comply with in terms of the Liquor Act are there, like the distance thing, and then you fill out the applications and you put in all of the required documents. So there are a bunch of other licensing that you need to get in addition to the liquor license. One, your establishment needs to be zoned in order to operate a business, right? So if you trading from your house, like a tavern, most people who operate taverns are trading from their own houses.
Yes.
So your house needs to be zoned, not just as residential, but as commercial as well. So it will be mixed between commercial and residential one. And then you will need to get a business license from the municipality. So the municipality gives you a zoning permit, and it gives you a permit in order to operate a business. And then you get your license. So in order to get a liquor license, these two things need to be in place already.
Okay.
And then once you get that license, so your application, you file your application with the liquor board, which is the regulator that gives you this license.
Liquor license.
And you file this with the liquor board, and your application must also be published in a newspaper. 2 types of newspapers, one that's local and one that's provincial, depending on the size of the establishment as well. And there, people will get the opportunity to comment on whether or not they object to the permit being granted or not.
Okay.
And if they don't receive objections, they assume that everything is fine, and they go, okay, yeah, you've ticked the application, you've done all of the things that you need to do in order to make sure that your establishment is worthy of being granted a license, and if everything is well, then you get your license.
Okay. So the church can get an opportunity to object.
Yeah,
and
to the issuing of a new license. But even if you do have an existing license, so even if the church members missed the opportunity to comment when the application was made, liquor licenses are renewed annually, and so at any step of the way, at any point, the church people can just put in objections or comments to the renewal of licenses, or they can complain about a license holder who either does or doesn't do what they're supposed to do.
Okay. And sorry, what I would like to know is, because just before we did this show, I did some research so that I'll know and be clued up at a certain level about it. Why is the information so hidden it's hard to find and it's not readily available to people
What information?
regarding the Liquor Act. Because one thing I was looking for is how, because I stay here and there's a lot of establishments that do have a liquor license, but I've never seen their ads. Like you say, it needs to be in a newspaper, local. So that would be either Vukani or City Vision for us.
So there, a person actually has a discretion when they talk about local, because local for many years has been what do you call these white people?
City, Cape
Six
August.
times, August,
Oh,
things like
yes.
that. That's generally what is accepted as a local, yeah. So when I have to publish any notices in terms of any law, what I publish in a Times or an August or something like that, because that's generally what the system recognizes
As local.
But those are the newspapers that people actually have to buy, and ordinary people don't buy newspapers. Okay. I'm going to speak for myself. I don't buy newspapers.
I also don't.
And the ones I sometimes see notices about liquor licenses and things like that in the free local newspapers. I sometimes see them. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I see them. I don't know whether they're always there, but yeah.
Because I remember when the milk was about when it was constructed and moving past it, I saw a notice, and that's when they were talking about they're going to be granted a liquor license for them to operate. I never saw one for Rands, and I never saw one for the others, and I'm going to say this, I hardly even touch Ivukani these days. I hardly even touch a City Vision, let alone the Cape August,
the one
the
you have
Times.
to actually pay for. Yeah.
The ones that you have to actually pay for. Because I myself included, we more consume now online, digital than we do with as much as the paper is.
The law, it will never, okay, I mean, at some point the law will catch up to that that's going to take a million years and a half to actually get the legal.
Yeah, okay, now we talk about, because I saw also with the taverns, there needs to be a number of toilets, resting rooms for both. One is to be male, one is to be female.
That's the actual requirement, that there has to be separate toilets, not necessarily a number, but they have to be separate. There has to be a male one and a female one.
Does it factor the amount of people that are, or is there again a requirement on the number of people that needs to be at the establishment at one time?
Okay. So with different establishments, different numbers, and this is also where the zoning part comes in, and your other permits or licensing, especially when it's a place that also sells food and stuff. Then there's additional health and safety standards that you also have to take into account. But at a Shibin level, there has to be a male one and a female one, and then at different categories of establishments, then they'll take into account the floor space to determine the number of patrons that they can serve, and then what numbers of toilets and things like that should be available. But that's building stuff rather than the actual law. The law says male, female, separate.
That's it. Okay, and exits?
And there must be an emergency exit.
Because in most of our shippings, or rather let's say, which is the proper way? Do we say shipping? Do we say tavern? Or it's the same thing?
Shipping and tavern is more or less the same thing, yeah.
Okay, tavern. Okay, so in most of the taverns, I'm seeing one exit. And it's
because most of them are in a residential building, usually. And so Landla is the same way with Pumanga, but there must be an emergency exit. And depending on how the house is structured, emergency exit could be some of these places you go into the garage, right?
Mm.
You go into the garage, and that's the business, right?
Yes.
And so Lamnyango Upuma a garage into the house could be the emergency exit, but I say because you don't get access
Yes.
to that. Some places you will see the sign.
Yeah.
Ezinye you don't, but it should be there, and it should prominently be displayed. This is the exit. This is the emergency exit.
Because in Kenya,
and it shouldn't be blocked, and it shouldn't be difficult to open
at
in
all
case of an
times.
emergency. Yeah.
Because in one province there was a stampede, and it was just one exit.
And then usually emergency exits kwindawo zaselokishini is i-gate.
Hey, yeah.
That is the emergency exit, and then i-gate yakhona maybe ayivuleki okanye ayivuleki the whole thing. You can't like open the whole thing. You can only open the small gate within the gate. Then it's
Now, age-wise, we understand that by law, alcohol should not be sold to any persons under the ages of 18.
Yeah.
So, we should then assume that an under 18 person should not enter these establishments.
Yeah.
So what happens when we see these kids getting into these establishments? Kids buying, either they're buying liquor or kids are buying cigarettes within these establishments.
So both of those things are not allowed to be sold to minors, right?
Yes.
And if we all know that if an establishment does sell to kids and people who are minors, kids and people who are minors, that establishment is breaching its own license and the law in general. And so you as a person who's viewing this, you have the obligation to report. You report to the liquor board or the police, and they then take it up with the person who holds the license.
Okay. Another thing with kids, let's say the establishment is here. Are kids then allowed to sit right next to the establishment? Are kids allowed to, when I am going, can I bring my kid in? Because my fear about this whole thing is we are exposing the kids to such, I'm not going to say behaviors, but they're then accustomed to people drinking around them, to people buying alcohol around them. I know as an owner of a tavern, I'm not responsible. Well, I shouldn't be taking responsibility for anyone's kid drinking at an early age, but my business kind of then exposes the kids to that.
Yeah, yes, I hear that. But okay, so one thing, in relation to people going to these establishments with their children, it's not permitted for the kids to be within the shebeen, but more than that, it's trying to not what is this word, desensitize. It's not okay. So one, they can't be sold alcohol, right? Children are not allowed to be sold alcohol. Whether they loiter around the business, that's a bit difficult for a person to actually regulate. That okay, there are children that are just hanging out in front of my establishment. I remember when I was a kid and we would loiter around a place that sells alcohol, we would immediately be chased away.
Yes.
And For a long time, I believe that was the law, that and to an extent, it is the law. But obviously, you take your child to a restaurant that sells alcohol and you consume alcohol while with your child. So it's not necessarily illegal, but a parent has to determine what's right for them and their own child. But an establishment owner has the responsibility to make sure that the establishment complies with the law, and the law says don't sell, don't allow children to consume, and that's what they can do. That's what they have control over. And then they also have control over, like a prudent business person would say, okay, in order to protect my business interests, and the impression of my business in the community, I will ensure that young people don't actually even come near this space.
And I must say big up to Rans, because they've got those guys that are outside the establishment on this main road side, and whenever kids are there, they chase them away. Because for a long time, kids are just sitting there and loitering, and if Undu is putting a bottle at the bottom, they will then grab. I saw that happening quite a few times, and we've been chasing the kids away from there. And big up to them for then hiring people, employing people to go and do that. Because we're already in a township. There's been said that when the kid is turning 1, there's a party and there's alcohol. There's going to be kids around who are coming to the 1-year-old's party, and us as parents, we're sitting, we're drinking alcohol. There's alcohol, and some families do even cater for the little ones, right?
In terms of what? In terms of alcohol?
No, with mkomboti.
Really?
Yeah, and food. But then again, my issue is that kids are then again exposed to abanye abantwana bayathunywa utywala. They're being sent to the shop to go buy alcohol. Again, that is exposure. There's people drinking within estradweni, holding their beers. It's exposure. For us, Tine Kailicha, there's Ipagini, there's Rands, where children, I'm not going to say children must not walk around those places, but then there is exposure. So our kids are then exposed to, and I'm not talking about, yes, you'd say any kid when there's wine, they're exposed. Kids watching this podcast will see the wine. My fear is when we partying, when we are drinking on an occasion, then kids are then exposed to that. And that's where my issue is. And secondly, again, as us as community, we like to throw stones at these establishments for our kids consuming alcohol. So what is the liquor law then in terms of protecting minors or protecting kids from exposure from alcohol?
So apart from the blanket prohibition on consumption and sale to minors, apart from that big one, there are many things that the liquor board and other organizations, which do alcohol and alcohol abuse advocacy and education do in relation to make more awareness of the issues. I mean, even in businesses that are trading in alcohol do a lot in terms of giving or making more advocacy into alcohol related or alcohol abuse related issues. I mean, as a person who drinks alcohol, whenever I consume an alcoholic beverage, usually on the outside it says alcohol is addictive. There's a warning that says, the law says that they must all have it.
Yes.
There must be a warning that says alcohol is addictive. You shouldn't consume it. It's not supposed to be sold and consumed by people under a particular age and all of those things. So there's lots of advocacy would you tell manje? Maybe about this is a bad idea. But even in can I mention SAB?
Yes, yes.
All of the ads, these guys SAB have the warnings and all of the advocacy. They have multiple things that they always have on the go, which speak to the issue of alcohol use, alcohol abuse, and how minors and what was the last ad that I saw? Oh no, it wasn't from SAB. It was from the Western Cape government about road safety and all of that. Okay. So there are many things and issues that are always being raised by the community that regulates and people who participate in the sale of alcohol. There's also a liquor association, liquor license association, which is an association by people who have liquor licenses, like about SAB and people who trade in alcohol, major companies who trade in alcohol. They also have their own campaigns and advocacy in relation to issues around alcohol and young people and addiction and community work and social outreach.
So
Corporate social
community. Yes.
That there are many things that are there and that are available, which people just need to have more access to. It's not that it's difficult, especially the liquor license. What's it called again? Liquor License Association. That association does a lot. I've forgotten the name now, but it does a lot in terms of the advocacy around all issues which affect liquor license holders and in relation to government and communities. Because Blaauwberg, the biggest asset is the community.
Yes.
We are the ones that consume
a lot
the products that they sell.
So they're trying to give back.
Yeah.
I'm saying trying because Nandi
they do try to be responsible, and it's in the cracks are far and very wide because there's a lot of people. Imagine, I don't know how many people actually consume alcohol, but I imagine that it's a lot in my household. All of the adults in my household drink alcohol, so.
Yeah, I'm the only adult that doesn't. 1, 2, 3. That's fine. Yeah.
Oh man.
Sorry.
Now when you're ready, I'll just cut it.
Alright. What was I supposed to say again? Oh, introduce myself. Hey.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, Chwayita Mathiso from Mathiso Attorneys.
I got $1 billion dream. Yeah, I need $1 billion tea. Yeah.